Hey there, good morning, good evening, good afternoon, guys. This is Jeff checking in again because we are continuing making our audiobook and video book version of Meditations for the Independent Poet, which is a collection of mini essays on the business of poetry. Today we're going to try to make it through riffs number 69 through 65, more or less. And 69 starts off with a quote from Marcus Aurelius. What comes from outside is not worrisome. At some point, the independent poet may consider organizing an event. Before the event comes the vision of the event. The mind may conjure a room full, refreshments, sold out tickets, a DJ finding the next track, laughs for every joke the host makes. For a poet new to organizing, the reality may often be sobering. A mostly empty room, unsold tickets, and a nervous energy in the air. Of course, it may not be an event, but a book that launches or a poem that never receives recognition. So, what's an independent poet to do when vision and reality clash? Change the metric of success. Find how many people want to attend the event and plan seats for a quarter of them. Worry less about attendance and more about the production. Make the large gathering into a selective premier event that the few privileged enough to come will tell others about. Count less how many books you sold and instead how many you were able to give away. Don't be concerned with how many tickets you sell, but how many people you reach out to every day. Notice the common thread. A goal I have no control over is not a goal that determines my success. Riff number 68, quote from Marcus Aurelius. Those who praise will blame. Mulch volcanoed around the trunk to help the maple hurts the tree. Braces to stabilize against the wind weaken the root. My growth depends on me and not on my help. Sharing a video with friends leads to viewers who click, but click away faster. Asking family to read a poem leaves me feeling I created a masterpiece. The truth is held until I leave the room. The video too boring. The poem cryptic. Even if the video's flawless, the poem perfect. Problems persist. The video stays in my friend circle. The poem never leaves my family. When starting to achieve creative and financial independence, how tempting it is to turn to people the poet already knows, to let the bracing handle gusts. One day, though, the tree is too tall for the supports. Worse, the roots never grew to sway. Even the most famous person eventually reaches the end of the circle, but never learned how to draw the stranger. To achieve true creative and financial independence, the poet flattens the mulch, removes the braces. The independent poet does not seek the familiar, but the stranger. Riff number 67, a quote from Marcus Aurelius. The smallest success is no small success. Not unusual for the poet to take an hour to put the comma back in. Not unusual for a person to only buy a book the 10th time she saw it. Not unusual for a new event to draw 4 people. Not unusual for no one to recognize my name. Not unusual for a reader to dislike what I wrote. The poet moving toward creative and financial independence will find a success story for every occasion. Making a decision in a poem is a success. Having my book seen 10 times is a success. Hosting an event of any size is a success. Having new people to be introduced to is a success. Creating work that not all people enjoy is a success. 。 . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . . Riff number 66. If able, move. For the first decades of my life, I was caught in the waves of the ocean. I did not organize a single event. People had thrown me parties for birthdays or surprises. I attended open mics and readings, openings, releases. Maybe you're like I was, a passenger in other people's journeys, swept in the current, but not the cause. To be fair, being a participant is a gift, plenty to sustain in its own right. Just being in the ocean is enough to voyage far from home. In the years after I organized my first event, in the hundreds since, I found more gifts and lessons. I'm discussing events here because poetry is not only found at a single desk in a room where a poet sits alone with a page or screen. Poetry is also found in community. And poets want to celebrate the single poem they've written, the poems they've rehearsed, the poems they've put in collections, as well as the poems others have written, the poems others have rehearsed, and the poems others have put into collections. Part of the grandeur of the ocean comes from the loud, constant energy. The greatest contribution that comes with organizing is the movement. The venue morphs, equipment enters, the host promotes, people talk, poets perform, the air vibrates, the audience listens, memories form. The energy from one event outlives the event itself. People recall how a poem made them feel. They may have been inspired to write a poem of their own. The eyes look out for the next. The independent poet does not have to create events, but hosting may be the biggest catalyst for personal and communal growth, both. Excuse me. All right, let's do one final riff for today. It starts with a quote from Marcus Aurelius. This is riff number 65. Look into the soul of those who blame, hate, or insult to see who they are. Understanding the needs of people around me enables me to understand their motivations. Abraham Maslow proposes that people navigate a hierarchy where the lowest levels of need, including food and shelter, are followed by more social needs, including to belong, gain status, and reach self-actualization. Assuming most of those we interact with regularly have a place to sleep and food to eat, we can direct attention to higher needs, like belonging and status. Sorry, I'm dealing with a science fiction, so I'm going to try to make this without much water. I'm going to be a little bit. Give me 1 sec. Appreciate your patience. Sorry about that. Assuming most of those people we interact with regularly have a place to sleep and food to eat, we can direct attention to higher needs, like belonging and status. The literary world is highly dependent on these sections of hierarchy. The industry is built on selectivity. Contests work down to long lists, short lists, and finalists. Retreats and fellowships cap their size to 1/10 of their applicant pool. Awards can launch a poet's career. Tenure positions and their stability are difficult to come by and decreasing. For their part, community members seek not only opportunities but belonging. They praise the recipients. They not only buy the books of the winner, but talk to each other about the winner's work. Current poets are often keeping tabs on the work of current poets. In an industry driven by status and belonging, the creatively and financially independent poet represents not only an alternative, but a threat. The independent poet may not look to the same symbols of status other poets turn to. The independent poet may not belong to the community where other poets are members. In fact, other poets may not even be aware that other status symbols in other communities could even exist. While there are more reasons for conflict and negativity, the independent poet, being a rarity currently, should expect pushback. A system in many ways lives, does not like being identified, and does not like seeing alternatives gain momentum. A living thing, when threatened, fights to preserve itself. An independent poet would do well to see attacks as an expression of fear of the change the poet wishes to create. All right, guys, we're slowly making our way through the book. Again, you can find copies at The Stanza, my poetry venue, or you can also find copies of the book for purchase at theversuspoetry.com/books. I'll see you guys later. Hope you have a good day, have a good night, and good afternoon.